Rain had a way of turning the yard into a mirror of the sky, thin clouds tremoring under every puddle, and Isaiah Quell learned to read such mirrors as carefully as he read the tiny letters he stole from the margins of cast-off ledgers. The kennels sat at the edge of the oak brake like blunt wooden teeth, their roofs ribbed with rusted tin that sang when the wind scraped across. He rose before the house lamps, always before, so the hounds would know his footfall first and not the boots of the overseer, so their breathing could greet him like a hush in a chapel and not a warning. He knew each throat and paw and scar, the curl of ear on Moss, the stubborn paw of Bertha that dragged when she grew tired, the singed whiskers on Patch where a lamp had kissed him by accident. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. He knew his own scars, too, though he did not look at them. A man did not need his eyes to keep a tally, the skin remembered on its own. Isaiah worked by the count of breath more than the count of hours, 4 breaths to unbar, 6 to swing the door, 2 to catch Moss's eager muzzle with his palms so the dog would not leap and wake the yard. They loved him because he made their world predictable, clean straw, measured water, a voice that never broke like a stick. In the easy rise and settle of his voice, the hounds learned a new language that the men in the big house never bothered to notice. He drew water from the well in a careful rhythm and carried it over the moonsunk ruts that cartwheels had cut and deepened. Together, the dogs drank as if at a council, heads down, tails soft, a low chuffing at the bottom of their throats when Isaiah scratched behind ears. Their collars, stiff, oiled leather stamped with brass letters for show, were heavier than a man's belt. Isaiah had loosened each buckle by a hole over the winter, pretending it was for the dog's comfort when in truth he meant someday to slip things inside. Not yet. For now he had his reading in his head and his plans in the way he touched things. Isaiah's hands had learned the alphabet long before his eyes did. The alphabet of hinges, boards, iron teeth, knots, the way rope listened when you twisted it just so. You could read a rope, he'd found, with patience, it would tell you where it meant to tighten and where it meant to give. The man who owned him, Nathaniel Breyer, cheekbones like flint struck wrong, chin always dusted with what he'd shaved off and never fully lost, believed obedience was a simple machine, pain goes in, labor comes out. But machines were only as simple as the hands that built them. Isaiah made other machines out of breath and sound and the shape of his palm moving steady through fur. On mornings when mist lay flat over the cane rows, and the mosquitoes were drunk with their own work, Isaiah set the hounds on scents the master's son dragged, a strip of linen dabbed with turpentine and tobacco, a boy's game made into habit. The son, Levi Breyer, liked to holler to show the dogs where to turn, and to ride ahead and declare that he would make a huntsman of any man who listened. Isaiah did not answer. He listened to the dog's feet, the way they drummed and skidded on damp earth. He gave a whistle only now and then, a small thing, like a secret folded twice. The hounds learned the small things best. He kept another secret folded twice, letters. In the ash pit behind the smokehouse, where scraps were tossed, he found themselves bitten out from receipts and lists, an O black into his C, and are with one leg burned away, a sentence missing verbs. He stole grammar the way he stole air in the night, in sips. A girl from the kitchen, Della, had laughed once and told him his mouth moved when he read, every letter of fish jumping. He had smiled and pretended surprise at his own lips. Della knew a little reading too, the house had been her teacher in spite of itself. Labels on molasses jars and pepper tins, the stitched names in handkerchiefs, a psalm smuggled in her palm when the mistress hosted the minister. Between Della and Isaiah, letters began to gather like tiny birds in rafters no one looked up to see. Cobb, the overseer, never looked up. He looked at backs, at hands, at where the heel fell and if it fell fast enough. Cobb's hands were not strong, exactly, it was his manner that made men's knees go soft. He carried his whip like a man carried a cane, it was not the striking so much as the promise, the theater. In theater, Isaiah knew, the smallest gesture could change a room. When Cobb came near the kennels, Isaiah slowed his breath and went on with his work as if nothing had moved except the air. The dogs did not like Cobb, their tails went hard and their eyes slid to Isaiah, waiting. Isaiah's eyes stayed gentle and bored, the best disguise. At night he slept in a narrow shed that leaked summer fire and winter knives. He set his pallet under the place where the wallboards spaced a little wider, and through that he could hear the river in the distance when it swelled. The river had a long memory. Sometimes, when the moon made a blade of itself, he would hear a skiff's low hiss against cattails, and a small whistle from the far bank. It might be herons. It might be men who courted danger on behalf of other men. He did not answer. Not then. The master's house wore its pride like too much perfume. It was a white square of glare beyond the live oaks, columns big as anger, porch boards polished with the step of women carrying trays they did not get to set down. The mistress, Eugenie, walked the upper gallery some afternoons like a patient ghost and sighed loud enough for windows to rattle. The son, who had not yet learned the edges of his cruelty, practiced it on easy things: cats, a lamb, a boy who brought him cool water slow. Isaiah saw the practicing and marked it. Practice was a habit one day a man would call nature. In the kennels the hounds studied him as he studied them. He named them true names under his breath that had nothing to do with what the brass said. Moss was elder, Patch became brother, Bertha, with her dragging paw, he called Mercy. The pack took those secret names like blessings. When he cleaned, he spoke to them of what the wind carried, of rumors that moved underfoot like moles. A cabin burned 2 farms west because a woman would not stop crying for a son sold away yesterday morning. The men had to hold her down so the fire would not burn her too, they said. A boy was taken to the iron yard for the crime of walking too straight past a white man's fence. In the kitchen, Della took anything that wasn't nailed to the world and made it into food. A woman is a hinge, she told Isaiah while gutting fish. Worlds swing on her when she works right, and when she creaks, people call her wicked for making a sound. Della's eyes were canny and soft, their whites clear as an egg's. She wiped her hands and showed him another letter, the G he always wanted to make like a C with a tail. He drew it in steam on the window and watched it vanish. A man from the river came to the quarters one evening with a load of reeds and a song you could not hum because it was nothing but a hum itself. He worked the reed into a basket and then, as if idly, into a net. His name was Anan. He had traveled, he said, down to the salt and then back again, and in his travels he had met men who believed rivers could carry more than trade. He was careful and never named anything so large that the air itself would turn informer and carry it. But he did ask Isaiah, who served the master's dogs, whether the dogs had ever been set on a man who had not yet been found guilty of anything but running toward his own feet. "There's what they're trained for," Isaiah said softly, the sky already pulled purple in at the corners. "And there's what they've learned that no one taught them." Anan looked at him a long time. "A dog learns a man's heart the way a river learns a bank, by touching it every day until it knows where to bend and where to break it." Isaiah wiped his hands on his trousers though there was nothing on them. He thought of Mercy with her dragging paw and how she would lean her whole body into his thigh as if to graft herself to his bones. He thought of Elder's keen eyes and Brother's shameless delight the first hour out of straw. He thought of how, when he whispered, the dogs' heads would turn before their ears did, as if their minds had gone to him first. He thought of Della's letter G fading on the window. In the hush that followed, the frogs began, and crickets begged the darkness to keep. Isaiah said, not to Anan but to himself, "I have a whistle they don't know the meaning of." Anan nodded once, as if Isaiah had said something practical about rope or weather. "Then you have a bridge," he murmured. "Bridges don't call attention, they just hold." The next weeks walked by on their own feet. Isaiah did not speak to Anan again, not in a way a man could call speaking. He took to slipping little things under collar leather, twist of paper wrapped in wax, piece of thin wire, a broken button with a hollow where someone had once hid snuff. He made errands of kindness and learned the landscape of locks around the house. Where keys lived. How many? Which ones had teeth like a cat and which like a saw? He kept those shapes in his fingers, the way a skilled cook kept spice measurements in her palm. Levi Breyer liked to ride out with a shotgun and return with his shirt open, chest blooming with boast. The hounds trotted behind, tongues pouring heat. "They love me," Levi said to his companions. "Like soldiers love a general." Isaiah held his mouth shut over the truth, that soldiers who loved like that followed orders even when the ground itself disagreed, and that loving meant the general had to be worthy. Isaiah gave a soft clicking with his tongue and the pack fell into a calm that made Levi glance back once, suspicious at the quiet. The mistress took the headaches that year. Della was made to boil willow bark and keep cloths cool. Once, when the mistress fainted on the gallery, Isaiah brought the hounds to the far side of the yard and paced them until their panting dwindled. He knew that sound could needle the head even from a distance, and he meant to give the woman nothing to blame. She had eyes like river glass, sometimes they cut, sometimes they only reflected what stood in front of them. She said Isaiah's name once, but the way a woman said a broom's name when it did not hang straight on its nail. Cobb grew mean in small ways. A nail on a post set higher so a man would miss and be called clumsy. A bucket left-ended so water sloshed and he could laugh at a stain. Fists not closed when they landed, a sign of vanity more than mercy. Isaiah learned the rhythm of Cobb's coming and going the way he learned weather. In the lull of noon, while the house ate, Cobb sometimes disappeared to the sheds where he kept his hidden whiskey and his louder secrets. Those hours Isaiah spent with the dogs and the collars and the knots, and he practiced whistles so quiet they rode beneath other sounds like roots. Brother learned the low call first, that meant stay and look like you're not staying. Mercy learned the one that meant slow as syrup. Elder, famously jealous of his own mind, learned the whistle that said, this new sound belongs to something you love, me. Once Isaiah had that one, the pack knitted to him in a way that no man with a lash could ever unweave. The first time a chance to test the bridge came, it came crooked. 2 boys from the neighboring place crossed the river and took a piglet for sport, then got scared and dropped it half dead in the cane. Cobb saw the trail and thought of glory. He fetched Isaiah and the pack and shouted loud enough for the river to hear about how a poor man's theft was the same as a rich man's, only uglier. The dogs nosed the dirt and the broken stems, and Isaiah felt their confusion. They knew pig from boy and the story was pig. He gave the new whistle under his breath, added a ring of tongue against teeth, and let his body say what his lungs could not, we walk a different trail now. The hounds, trained to glory and used to the chase, did a thing no one watched for, they drifted. They drifted toward shade and stillness, toward the place where a pig might try to breathe. They found the animal, a small shuddering thing with eyes like polished seed. Cobb cursed and told Isaiah to call them back. Levi, who had come to witness, rolled his shoulders, disappointed. Isaiah crouched and put a hand on the piglet's chest. He felt the tiny life tumble there like a bead in a cup. He whispered to Elder and the dog lay down right there, worked his breath slow, and the pack followed the breath. Cobb spat and called it useless, said next time Isaiah would be whipped for letting humane notions waste a day. But Levi's woman, a visiting cousin with a ribbon like a river across her bodice, watched Isaiah's hand and the obedient circle of dogs, and smiled in a way that had nothing to do with men. She whispered to Levi about how fine it was to have animals so under command. Levi's spine lengthened an inch on praise he thought meant him. That night, Della smuggled Isaiah a crust and half an onion. Cobb thinks of ways to make you small, she said, but when he does, he gives me a measure of how big you are. Isaiah smiled, then let his face fall back to neutral because even in the dark smiles could rust and make noise. The pack loves like a rope holds, he said. I'm learning how to tie the right place. In a shed, he lit a stub of candle and studied a scrap he had found in the ash pit, an advertisement for shoes. The letters fit like a harness into the words, but he wasn't reading shoes. He was reading the way letters joined hands. S and H, one like a snake, the other like a chair. O like a mouth, E like a comb, S again, slick. He traced them in the air and felt the shape inside his wrist. To write, one day, without any ash or window steam at all, he let the thought touch him and then go. He was careful with hope the way a careful man was with fire. Useful, and liable to run. Summer's hard shoulder pressed into the year and the river swelled enough to taste itself in the morning mist. Anan did not come again, not to be seen, but once Isaiah found a thin coil of wire near the kennels a man might mistake for trash. It had been bent and straightened many times, judged by the marks. He took it for a sign. Not a command, Isaiah had learned to mistrust the world's theatrics, but a small agreement between unseen hands. One morning, While the house prepared for a supper with men who wore their money like metals, Isaiah was told to keep the dogs quiet until full dark. The mistress did not want baying under fiddles. He welcomed the order. Quiet was something he could fashion. He fed the pack boiled oats instead of meat, a trick he had learned when he'd fallen sick and could not stand the smell of blood. Oats made the belly heavy but left the ears quick. He combed the hounds with a hickory fork and hummed a tune Anan's hum reminded him of. The hound's eyes glassed a little with contentment, and he leaned his forehead to Mercy's for a heartbeat. That evening, lanterns spilled honey down the steps of the big house. Fiddle sawed, laughter sawed harder. Isaiah walked the yard's shadow line and noted who came and went. Keys flashed and disappeared. Cobb fixed his hat and bragged of his whip arm to a man who cared only to brag back. Levi's boots shone so loud Isaiah could almost hear them. Della and 2 other girls passed with trays, their shoulders squared under private burdens. Isaiah stood near the magnolia and practiced the voiceless whistle in the notch of his teeth, barely breathing. The moment his life began to pivot was not announced, it arrived with the simple carelessness of a man who thought himself safe. One of the visiting men, a broker who traded in everything that could be listed in columns, took a girl's wrist when she flinched and laughed with his mouth open, the way boys did when they wanted the world to see their teeth. The girl, young yet, did not cry, she went still as a bucket filled to the brim. Isaiah saw the stillness and hated it with a pure flame, hated that survival required a woman to fold herself into a shape that looked like obedience but was only concentration. He could not step forward without stepping to the edge of a pit, he had learned that arithmetic as a child. He looked at the pack in the dim of the kennels, at Elder's patient face and brother's resting grin, and he knew the bridge was finished whether he crossed it or no. Later, in the hush that follows too much fiddling, Levi kicked open the kitchen door to ask for more peaches and cream. Della kept her face pleasant while her hands smoked across the table. "Ask the orchard," she said with an innocence that made the kitchen girls bite their lips to stay silent. Levi laughed and went out into the night for air he claimed he needed in larger gulps than other men. Isaiah, standing in the yard seam, looked up. A storm had come quietly, a line of bruised clouds gathering over the cypress like men gathering under a bad idea. Lightning stitched itself far off and waited to become sound. He watched Levi walk toward the kennels, bored and restless, and saw in a glance that the boy would try to make sport with what was obedient. He would wake dogs for the spectacle of it, for the story he could tell tomorrow about how he had made them sing under his call. Isaiah moved first. He stepped into the kennel corridor like a man stepping into his own mouth to shape a difficult word. He slid the bar from Elder's door with a fingertip and closed it again without truly opening anything. He blew his silent whistle, the one that was more a thought than a sound. Elder's eyes flicked, then settled. "Hush," Isaiah's body said. "Not yet." Levi came in whistling something out of key. "Up, you curs," he called. "Let's show the night how we hunt thunder." He rattled a door. The dogs went stiller than sleep, a stillness born of Isaiah's long work. Levi paused, dogs were not supposed to go still. He frowned and rattled again. Lazy beasts. The whip he did not carry was in his voice anyway. Isaiah moved from shadow to shadow with the ken of a man who knows how light thinks. He stood behind Levi as if to assist, face smooth. "They ate heavy," he said. "Oats. Make them slow. Wouldn't run proper." "Oats?" Levi turned, incredulity turning his mouth soft and wide. "Who told you to?" "Mrs. Eugenie. For her headache." Isaiah let the lie stand upright with good posture. "Said quiet house tonight." Levi weighed the threat, angering his mother's comfort or satisfying his itch. That he hesitated told Isaiah everything about the size of Levi's courage. Lightning rolled again, closer now, and made the tin roofs mumble. Levi waved a lazy hand. "Keep them locked. I'll have them at sunup. We'll run them hard enough to make up for this foolishness." He glanced once more, perhaps unsettled by the order in the dog's eyes, and then he left. Isaiah's breath uncoiled after a long minute. He looked down the row of doors, at the brass letters lying, at the secret names sitting patient in the straw. He opened his hand and felt the steadiness in it. He thought of the girl's wrist, of Della's face like the calm of a pond with wind skimming over it, of Aanan's hands twining reeds into net and net into possibility. He thought of Cobb's theater and the master's machinery. He thought of the river's memory. Then he thought of sound, the sound he would have to make once to undo 100 other sounds. He waited until the storm walked up to the eaves and pressed its wet face against the house. Wind combed the cane into a single direction. Lanterns shadowed and shivered on the gallery. Fiddle had gone to bed, men's laughter dropped to an aftertaste. In that door of an hour, Isaiah hid small packets inside 3 collars, waxed paper folded around a length of wire, a bent nail, and a taper shaved to a tooth he could light with a match struck against iron. He placed them as tenderly as a mother tucking a lock of hair behind a child's ear. He buckled Elder's collar last and leaned his forehead a second against the dog's forehead until their breath braided. He walked to the hinges. He oiled them knowing he should not, knowing there was power in squeal, but he wanted the doors to open like a held breath released, not like a cry that would call men before thought could move. He ran his thumb across each latch to smooth the burrs. His hands were sermons no one but dogs could hear. Della's shadow appeared at the edge of the yard and then dissolved. A woman's work was to appear and dissolve, to be everywhere and leave no footprint a man could punish. Isaiah did not wave, but he felt the air nod between them. He was ready. He had been ready since before he had given that first new whistle, maybe before he had learned the G. Ready did not mean safe, it meant that a man had decided which risk he could respect. The sky tore open once, long and bright, and in that theatrical flash he saw the big house plain as a tooth in a mouth. He saw the door where the Keys slept, the corner where Cobb kept his whiskey, the stair Levi would come down on legs clumsy with youth. He saw his own shed small as a shrug. When the darkness swallowed it back, the world felt like a room he had memorized and could walk blind. He gave a whistle so low that even the storm stooped to listen. Elder rose first, a polite standing as if a chair had scruffed him. Mercy followed with her careful drag, not sounding quite like a drag anymore. Excitement greased what pain left. Brother stood as if his name had been called. Isaiah unbarred 3 doors and left the rest latched. 3 was a number that could shape a night without letting it break past the shape he meant. He walked backward, slowly, and the dogs flowed with him to the corridor mouth. "Stay," his breath said. "Hold." His hand hung, half open, like a promise. He lifted his other hand and made a glide of 2 fingers toward the magnolia. Elder's ears queried, Isaiah answered with a blink. The pack moved like thought toward shade. On the gallery, a man laughed again and then coughed to disguise it. Someone tripped. The mistress's glass chimed once against wood. Keys scraped a table as a careless hand shoved them. Isaiah's skin lit with listening. The storm's edge slid deeper into the yard. It was time. To do nothing now would be to declare he loved the bridge more than crossing it. He would not love means more than ends. He tilted his head and gave the second whistle, the one that meant, to 3 minds that trusted him, not chase, not rage, not blood, but circle and guard. The dogs went. Not a sprint. A gathering. Elder first, wide and deliberate. Brother's grin turned into purpose. Mercy matched the angles with her own careful geometry. They moved along the house's back like tide. Isaiah moved too, a shadow sewn to their shadows. At the kitchen door, Della set a bowl down hard enough to make a clap and then lifted her skirts to step back, as if she had only startled herself. The latch held. In the dining room, chair legs scuffed. Isaiah sent Mercy to the kitchen corner where the window gave a view of the side door. He sent Brother to the rag bin under the exterior stair. He himself stood by the bottom of the gallery steps. Elder crept up 4 boards, silent, and held there, head up, nose alive. Keys gleamed again in lamplight and vanished as a hand, Levi's, swept them and swung them on a finger to amuse himself. He came down the steps whistling that off-key tune, swinging the keys, bored and Prince mad. He reached the bottom step and the 3 dogs were there before him, an arrangement drawn by a draftsman, one at each point of a triangle, Isaiah its quiet center behind them. Levi made a sound like a rooster trying to whisper. He lifted the keys higher without meaning to, a silly instinct to take treasure up and away. Elder did not move, but the weight of him came into the air like weather. Brother's tail made a single slow sweep, then stilled. Mercy's eyes were half-moons of patient light. "What is this?" Levi said, not a question. "Back, you mutts." He flicked his fingers as if to shoo flies. Elder inclined his head in that noble way that made men mistake attention for submission. "Step careful," Isaiah said, his voice calm as to a skittish horse. "They not in a hunting mood, sir. They in a listening mood." "Listening?" Levi snorted. "To you?" He took a step that looked small and was not. Brother shifted one paw, that polite warning the pack gave to fools. Levi noticed and grew hot. "They are my father's investment and my sport. I'll have them heal." He set the keys jammed into his belt, as if the keys could guard themselves by proximity to his importance. Isaiah could feel the night balancing on a hidden edge. Lightning rolled its shoulder. Wind made the magnolia's leaves clap their leather hands. Della's breath, in the kitchen just beyond, hitched and smoothed. Somewhere, Cobb laughed at his own joke to nobody. Isaiah opened his hand, palm down, and pressed the air once, a sign only 3 living minds on this ground had been taught to read. The dogs eased a foot closer to each other, making the triangle smaller and the space Levi had to stand in smaller with it. Still, Isaiah breathed. He did not say to whom. "Cobb!" Levi shouted without turning. "Cobb!" He did not want to call his mother for this, he wanted a man to see him triumph. Cobb's answering step came slow and swaggered through shadow. "Problem, boy?" Cobb said, then saw the arrangement and let a curse slip sideways through teeth no one had been keeping an inventory of. Isaiah felt a cord plucked inside him. He saw Cobb choose between making a scene and making a lesson. The overseer chose lesson as always, because lessons ripened into later scenes. He drew his whip slow, letting the leather whisper out of its lazy circle, and he smiled the way a man smiled who thought every creature was a stringed instrument and he the only fiddler. "Careful," Isaiah said again, and this time he said it to the air, to the storm, to the river's memory, to Della, to the dogs, to himself. He could feel the night change shape under the word. Cobb stepped to strike Elder, a display, a prelude, and the dog did not move. Isaiah had not taught attack. He had taught geometry and patience. But geometry could topple things if a fool leaned into the wrong angle. Cobb leaned. Isaiah brought his fingers to his mouth. The whistle he gave then was not quite like the others, it was a braid, a hush, a circle, a hold, and inside it a new bright thread that meant now. Elder flowed sideways, smooth and deliberate, putting his body between leather and Levi, between leather and the keyring, between leather and Isaiah's future. Brother dipped to the foot of the stairs and looked up, every muscle a question Isaiah had already answered. Mercy slid her careful body so close to Levi's boot that he could feel her warmth and mistake it for fire. "Call them off," Cobb said, rearing his arm in a way that made the storm look modest. "Or I'll..." Isaiah did not watch the whip, he watched the space the whip would cut. He saw the lesson Cobb meant to play, and he chose a different song. He lifted his open palm, the skin crisscrossed like a map, routes he had never taken, and closed it around nothing. The dogs, reading the invisible handle he had grabbed, moved as one. They did not lunge. They did not tear. They stepped into Levi's space and made it airless. Elder's shoulder touched Levi's thigh and set him a half step back toward the stair. Brother crowded the other side. Mercy put her chest against Levi's shin with the inexorable gravitas of a door swinging shut. The keys at Levi's belt chimed once, a small bell in a church no one had yet founded. "Get off," Levi stammered, and the whip came like a question mark through the air. Isaiah put 2 fingers to his lips, to blow the note that would turn the night from a geometric exercise into a road. He knew once it was blown there would be no more postponements, no more practicing. This would be the sound that chose the side the river flowed toward. He tasted iron and rain on his tongue. He could see Della's silhouette at the kitchen window, her hand on the latch she had not unhooked for years because life had taught her hands to be jails to themselves. He could hear, far off, Anan's hum stitched into thunder, and nearer, Cobb's breath saying wicked little prayers to his own viciousness. Isaiah smiled once, not because there was humor in any of it, but because he felt the bridge under his feet and knew that it held, and because the dogs he loved had become the rope he could climb out on. He drew a breath deep enough to set 100 small lanterns trembling, and then the gallery door swung, and Nathaniel Breyer himself stepped into the yellow light, pistol in hand, and said, "What in God's name is?" This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. This mess? Nathaniel Breyer finished, the question breaking off in the doorway as lightning glassed his face and pistol both. The lantern behind him gave his hair a copper rim. Isaiah did not move. He did not need to. Movement belonged to Aaron Dog. Cobb lowered his whip a fraction in a reflex of deference. Levi, trapped in the small triangle the dogs had drawn, tried to grow taller without rising on his toes. Della's hand stayed at the kitchen latch, not pulling, simply learning the shape of a new future under her palm. Isaiah did not look at her. He could not afford to see hope and still be precise. "Sir," he said to the master with a steadiness he felt as a burn in his ribs. "The dogs are restless under thunder. They mind better when quieted." "Restless?" Nathaniel repeated, voice even, eyes sliding to the pack, then to Isaiah's hand, which hung in the air like a carpenter's level. He held the pistol with the ease of an old habit, the way a man holds a tool he trusts more than people. "Cobb?" Cobb opened his mouth and found nothing inside worth saying. His mouth closed with a sound like an empty drawer pushed shut. Water from the eaves pattered like a spilled box of seeds. Isaiah took one soft step back and the dog shifted with him, a tide unhooking itself from the shore. Levi's breath went ragged. The keys at his belt spoke again, a small clink, a prayer bell. Isaiah's heart walked toward the sound. "Dogs," Nathaniel said, slowly, as if testing them. "Heel." Elder did not so much as blink. The command cracked and lay at his feet like a branch. Nathaniel's eyes found Isaiah's, and in the look that followed was the faintest tremor, not of fear, but of having stepped onto ice he had supposed was stone. He cocked the pistol with an intimacy of motion, his finger doing as it had done 1,000 times before in duck blinds and at bottles set like crowns along fence posts. "Call them off," he said. It was not a shout. Shouts do not carry as far as quiet words spoken by men who have never had to repeat themselves. Isaiah did not lower his hand. "They're called, sir," he said. "They are with me." Levi's laugh snapped out and died. Nathaniel's finger tightened a hair and stopped. Isaiah could feel the night deciding. He did not plan the next breath. He took it, and when it came, it brought with it the taste of wet iron and pitch, and a memory of a letter traced in ash, G, for gate, for go, for God, for good or grave. "Let the boy step up," Nathaniel said, nodding at Levi as if the triangle were nothing more than a carpet wrinkle to step over. "Cobb, strike if the animals move for him." Cobb lifted the whip again, comforted by orders. Levi shifted his weight and the dogs adjusted microscopic, narrowing possibility. Isaiah could nearly hear the triangle change area. He thought suddenly of Della's voice, a woman as a hinge. Tonight the hinge was his hand. "Sir," Isaiah said, not knowing until the word left his mouth that he was going to say it, "give me the keys." Levi made a sound of astonishment so pure it sounded like a child's toy terrified by its own squeak. Nathaniel's head turned to Isaiah with the slow precision of a dial. "You forget yourself." "No, sir," Isaiah said. "Tonight I remember myself." He felt the steadiness in his knees the way a man feels a hook find purchase. "Give me the keys and the dogs will make room." Cobb spit sideways, missing his own boot by a lip. "You'll hang," he said, but the words came like a prediction said too late to spook anybody. Lightning lifted the yard and set it down again. The magnolia's glossy leaves held 100 small wet moons. Isaiah heard a single holler from the direction of the quarters, someone crying a baby back to sleep. Levi clutched at bravado. "You'll take them over my dead body." Isaiah did not look from Nathaniel. I am not here for your body, he said. I am here for your keys. He let his hand tilt a degree, the way a shelf tilts to send a marble rolling. Elder took a half step, enormous in its restraint. Brother matched. Mercy drew breath and planted, patient as earth. The air grew small around the pistol. Nathaniel made his calculation. He weighed the dog's obedience, eerie, unnatural, not to his voice, against the drama of firing a shot into his own son's night. He weighed Cobb's pride against his own desire not to be undone by his animals. He did not weigh Isaiah. Men like him often miscounted the weight of men like Isaiah until their arms ached from lifting what they thought would be light. Levi, Nathaniel said at last, voice carved from the hardwood of command. Pass the keys. Silence tightened. Levi's eyes flamed and then, as if a wick had burned to the end, guttered. His fingers fumbled the ring free. He thrust the keys out like an offering to a god he did not believe in and expected to swallow him anyway. Isaiah did not move forward to take them. He let Elder go. The dog stepped into the space with elegance and raised his head so that the keys brushed his brow with a small sacramental touch. Levi dropped them onto Isaiah's palm because anywhere else would have been madness. Metal nicked Isaiah's lifeline. Cool. Heavy. A sound at last that belonged to him. He closed his hand and looked back to Nathaniel. Thank you, sir, he said, a politeness that hurt him in its shape. Stand easy. Nobody needs bleeding tonight. He could feel Cobb's incredulity rippling behind him like a wet sheet shaken out. He could feel Della's breath catch and set again. He stepped sideways, and the dogs, satisfied with their geometry, widened the triangle until Levi stepped free as if released by a spell. Nathaniel's pistol never lowered, but his mouth did not know what word to make next. Isaiah spoke first. Cobb, he said without turning. Your bottle waits by the shed like always. Go bless it. I'll sit the dogs till dawn. The audacity of the sentence was a plank laid across a chasm. He put his weight on it calmly. Cobb snarled, humiliated into an ugly thinness. You ain't. Now, Nathaniel caught, the pistol a bright lesson in the dark. Do as he says. Cobb sputtered, then stomped toward the sheds, which had never before felt like a retreat path. The thunder made a lazy applause of it. Levi stood on the step, the place on his thigh where Elder had leaned tingling as if a ghost hand had pressed there. Isaiah lowered his hand at last. The dogs sank, chests to earth, breath long and steady. We'll pen them again, Isaiah said, and made a suggestion with his body instead of an order. Elder rose and padded to his door. Brother and Mercy followed. Isaiah barred the latches and slid the quieted night back into its skin. When he turned, the order of the house had shifted by a hair's breadth, enough to make new tracks possible by morning if a man was ready to walk them. Come to the office, Nathaniel said. He said it into the rain that moderated the edge on every sound. You and the woman there. His pistol lowered a notch. He did not look at Della, but the night looked for him. Della stepped from the kitchen with her chin like a coin you flip when the thing you want most is also the thing you fear. Isaiah fell into step with her. He felt the keys warm now in his hand, picking up his heat, learning him. He did not pretend to himself that they were his in any permanent sense. He knew the difference between holding and owning. But a held thing can open doors enough to change how owning is spelled in a man's mouth. The office smelled of paper, vinegar, stale cigars. Ledger columns sleeping in their wooden bed. A map of the river with red pins for landings, blue pins for danger. Nathaniel took his seat and set the pistol on the desk, cool and conversational as a paperweight. I will have order, he said to the room and to himself. Della's hands folded on her apron like doves that had learned to impersonate stones. Isaiah did not sit. A man who sits in certain rooms is a man who cannot leave quickly. He remained on his feet with the gravity of a post sunk deep. The thunder had begun to roll farther away, but the rain persisted, democratic. You have skill with beasts, Nathaniel said, measuring Isaiah as if the ledger could be made to contain a column for the animal obedience and one for the human nerve and then a neat little sum. You have abused my son's indulgence and my overseer's incompetence to make a display. He tapped the pistol with one long finger. Now tell me there is not a larger plan hanging on this little spectacle like mold on a damp beam. Isaiah let a breath out slow. If he lied, he would have to keep building lies on top of lies until the whole thing toppled. If he told so much truth the man could not ignore it, he would snap the thin threads that had just flexed instead of broke. There is a larger plan, he said. Della's intake of breath was a ribbon pulled tight. But it does not ask for blood tonight. Nathaniel's mouth quirked. Tonight, he repeated. He glanced at Della. You kitchen folk do love your nights in whispers. I will not have whispers. Then hear loud, Isaiah said, surprising himself with the heat in it. The keys rang once in his fist. I know your locks now. I know your dogs better than you ever will. I know the river better than the men who write on it with pins. I know which of your fences are for show and which are for keeping. There are men who hum at the far bank, sir, and women who can carry a secret twice as far as a man can carry pride. The plan is that one day, one night, your gates open and not a soul here remains behind them unless they choose to. The plan is that your dogs will escort them to the water like ushers at a wedding. Della made the smallest noise at the word wedding. It was not always a blessing in a place like this. Nathaniel's eyes brightened, a predator's interest when something small scurries where he thought the ground clean. You think you will do all this with 3 dogs and a hum, he said, amused, angry. With 3 dogs and a bridge, Isaiah said softly. And with the one thing you cannot buy by the pound. And what is that? Patience. The word sat between them, simple as bread. Nathaniel reached for the pistol and then did not pick it up. You will give me the keys. I will return them, Isaiah said, meeting the man's stare. In the morning. He stepped backward. And you will sleep before then. What is to keep me from shooting you where you stand? Nathaniel asked conversationally, turning the pistol so the lantern found its smooth side. A dozen things, Isaiah said. Your son's pride. Your wife's sleep. The sound a shot makes in a storm and what men think it means. The way a dog remembers who fed him. The fact that I did not let blood when I could have. And the simple fact that you want to know what I will do next more than you truly want me dead. I am interesting to you now. He could see the tiny, reluctant nod that meant the man agreed and hated himself for agreeing. Della's hand found Isaiah's sleeve briefly and then withdrew. It had been a touch like a fuse being checked, not lit yet. Morning, Nathaniel said at last, each syllable like a brick laid in a weak wall. Return what is mine. Go to your shed. Keep my dogs quiet. Isaiah inclined his head. He truly did not look at Della as they left. If he looked, the room would tilt. The rain had softened to a layered hiss. Cobb was a shadow hunched by a shed and he straightened with exaggerated calm when he saw them, a man pretending to have not been hiding from his own anger. Sleep, Isaiah said to him in a way that made the word both insult and mercy. He walked Della to the kitchen. Tomorrow becomes tonight, she whispered, not a question. Soon, he said. But not poor. Not messy. Not with men dying who could wake and make trouble the rest of our days. He touched the lintel with his finger like a man blessing a door in a house he did not own. Tell the others only that they must listen for a new sound. What sound? You'll know it when it comes. He did not sleep. He sat in the corridor between kennels and wrote in his mind with the keys bumping his palm, a letter to the river. He imagined the words as Della showed him once, body in each letter, and saw them assemble, T-O-N-I-G-H-T, not the literal tonight, but the tonight that could be any night once the pieces clicked. He watched the sky bleach from charcoal to pewter laced with milk. Roosters took the day in their lungs and shook it awake. When the first house girl stepped onto the gallery with a broom, he rose, returned the keys to their peg by the office door, and went back to the dogs with the same open face he wore every morning. Levi had puffed himself back up by breakfast. Run them hard, he said, as if nothing had eclipsed that sentence in the night. I want a proper bay. Isaiah ran them, but he ran them the way a man runs his hand across a book he means to read later. He learned, he smoothed, he did not dog-ear pages. The pack performed beautifully, which satisfied Levi's vanity enough that the boy did not know he had been given only a rehearsal. Days braided. Isaiah used them as material. He learned which men on neighboring places beat their animals and which gave them a playful cough and called it kindness. He learned which woman carried her sorrow like a jug filled without cease, and which carried it like a coin hidden clever in a hem. He learned where the marsh cupped footprints a full week and where the sand drank them before noon. He learned that Cobb slept heavy as a mule when he'd had his bottle and light as a cat when he hadn't. He learned the way Nathaniel's mouth twitched when some arithmetic on a page did not add to what the dirt said outside. He learned, above all, how patience takes apart a lock's heart one tumbler at a time. He taught the dogs one new whistle every week, only one, because newness, like heat, can blister if poured without care. Anan reappeared on a market morning like a man who had been there all along and decided to resolve the illusion. He never came near the house. He bought reeds with coin that made a new sound in the quarter and admired a girl's basket as if the basket was all he had eyes for. Only when he passed Isaiah near the well did he say, "The moon will be within storm again 8 nights thus. Men who hum will be in the weeds near the landing, provided no one is curious enough to light the reeds with cigarettes." He did not stop. "You have a bridge, friend?" "I have a choir," Isaiah said, only then realizing that is what he had built. "And a conductor's hands." Anan did not smile. "Do not take everyone," he said, soft, dangerous. "A river with too many boats attracts men who love nets." Isaiah nodded. "The young, the sick, the ones who will not survive another winter of picking bones out of soup. And those who can run and carry," Anan added. "You create not only freedom but a shadow to protect those who stay." The 8 nights that followed lived in his blood like a second pulse. He leaned into ordinary labor with visible zeal to cover the flares of preparation. Della salted meat and then salted conversations with tiny directives. If a child cried, it cried at just the right time to mask the slipping of a latch in practice. If a bucket dropped, it dropped where Cobb would go to check on it and not where the quarter women gathered to pass along a rhyme that taught children how to step in time when a whistle rose and fell. Isaiah did not go near the office keys again. He did not need to. The measure of the pegs lived inside his hand. He could open 4 doors in the yard without ever touching brass now. The night came without ceremony. The sky had a heaviness to it, as if a wet quilt were laid over stars. Frogs made a sound like cups kissed together. No lightning, just the endless inland of dark. Isaiah fed oats again and laid his palms against the dog's ribs one by one. "Church," he whispered. It was not a cue, only a tenderness. He said elder, brother, and mercy with him and left the others penned. 3 could move like thought. A dozen would draw eyes. He walked the corridor with Della shadowing at the yard's edge. Her hands held nothing, which meant they held 100 small things, a twist of waxed paper, a needle, a scrap with letters she had copied for him so they would both remember them when memory had to run faster than pain. Levi played at cards in the parlor with farm boys from 2 places over. Nathaniel read his ledger again, trying to make numbers excuse weather. Cobb lurked and drank and lurked again. The Mistress Eugenie walked the upper gallery with a hand to her head and another holding a damp cloth to keep the headache she loved in comfort. Isaiah opened nothing. He walked. He breathed. At the exact time the quarter women had been told, a lull took the yard. Night has these doors built in. If you learn them, you can step through. He lifted his hand. It weighed what a choice weighs. The first whistle was the circle. The second, the hold. The third, so soft it was barely the idea of a sound, was the now. Elder slid to the kitchen door and set his chest against it. The latch lifted on his weight like an old friend leaning back. Della slipped through and gathered 3 souls, a girl who had learned to chop onions with her eyes dry, a boy whose lungs whistled since winter, an old woman with hands like twigs but fingers that still remembered braiding a child's hair to put courage into the scalp. Isaiah led them not toward the front where the yard was flat and visible, but toward the magnolia shadow where the ground took feet and made them fewer. At the second whistle, far off by the sheds, another door moved, a lean man in the smithy whose back had taught him the geometry of pain and who carried in his palm a pin older than the house itself. He joined the shadow flow. At the third, by the wash-house, a girl pressed a doll to her chest and handed it back to the night like a gift too tender to take on a hard road. She stepped into the stream and did not look back. Cobb heard nothing at first. Men who love theater do not hear quiet work. But whiskey makes a friend of suspicion and grants it courage. He drifted into the yard and frowned at nothing in particular. Isaiah felt him by the shift in the dog's breath, by the angle of Brother's ear. He held up a finger, a different finger than before, not the conductor's claim, but a patient teacher's signal. Brother's mouth opened in a pant without noise. Mercy's drag became the gentlest brush, as if ground and paw were kissing goodbye. A pan fell in the kitchen, too loud, and Isaiah's ribs iced. Della's head snapped, apology cutting her, but the noise's blessing was that it sent Cobb toward the kitchen with a curse, away from the magnolia. Isaiah exhaled the exhale of a man who has just seen the bullet lift his hat clean off but leave his skull unbroken. They reached the second hinge of the night, the gate by the smokehouse. It had 3 sounds, a grunt of the latch, a complaint of the lower hinge, a pop of the top board. Isaiah had oiled hinge and shimmed board and whispered to latch without waking it over the past week. He slid the bar and it followed his hand like a good thought finding the right word. The stream moved through, woman, boy, girl, man, another woman, Della last, her mouth set in a line so calm it frightened him. Go, he said. Down the furrow, then the gully, then the cane. Elder will front. Brother will tail. Mercy will watch the left where the marsh ends. And you? Della asked. I have to fetch 2 more and, his throat closed a blink, and ask a last favor of a man. Favor? She looked at him as if he were crazy and brave both. These men do not give favors. They give themselves away, Isaiah said. If you ask right. He touched the back of her wrist. The heat there would be something he kept in a pocket on cold nights he had not seen yet. She left. The stream swallowed her. The night closed like lips around the taste of the plan. He doubled back. The house had begun to realize it had mislaid a shape, noise like a hive stirred. Cobb's slur sharpened. Levi's voice flung itself at the walls to climb them and see out. Nathaniel's quiet thudded heavy across boards. Isaiah went to the quarters, to a low door where a boy with a crooked foot slept, into a corner where a man too sick to rise that morning now lay open-eyed and willing as a sunrise already promised. He woke them without noise. Church, he breathed. The boy smiled and tried to stand too quickly. Isaiah caught him and set him down slower, making the boy feel fast again by the gentleness. He took the man's arm over his shoulder and learned the weight of another's future anew. A shout cut the night. Cobb had found the kitchen empty where life had been. Dogs, he hollered, baritone jagged. Dogs. Isaiah closed his eyes 1 heartbeat. He hated the word as they used it, like a bullet of syllables. He lifted his fingers and made a sound no one but 3 heads inside the dark would recognize. Elder turned the stream toward the old hog tunnel, a long, forgotten trench a boy had shown Isaiah Winters back because boys kept maps in their scuffed toes that men never thought to read. The stream slid into ground. Cobb's shout hit the yard and ran past, unable to bend with the rest of them. Nathaniel's voice now, low and clipped, light the lamps. Levi, the back porch. Take the gun I keep in the console. Cobb, your whip today is wit, do you understand? I want bodies, not blood. Bodies, Cobb repeated, gratified to be given a word he could chew like meat. Isaiah felt the house's eyes open. He had minutes, perhaps less. He walked into the knife of their attention like a man walking into rain he already wears. This way, he whispered to the boy and man with him, and he did not say where this way went because saying fixes things you need to keep liquid. On the edge of the gully, a lantern swung, bright as a lie. Levi's shoulders came behind it, important, quick. Isaiah pushed the boy against the earth and covered his mouth without gentleness and with total love. He set the sick man to sit. He lifted his hand and drew a new shape in the air, a cut, a carry, a counter. Brother moved into it like he'd been born there. He trotted out, merry as a drunk at a harvest, and then, just so, he turned tail and ran with manufactured panic. Levi laughed. Cobb. You see? The curs know where they've gone. He gave chase with lantern and youth and story in his blood. Cobb shouted to wait, but Cobb's shouts were louder than they were useful. Men followed the boy in the light. Isaiah breathed again. Children used to play at leading men with lanterns into circles. It was a game as old as power. Brother played it now without the cruelty of children, which is to say perfectly. Isaiah got the boy and the man into the trench. He turned, and Mercy was there, as if she understood that his left side had no watcher now. He touched her head. Go, he said, meaning, keep Della's left. Keep the Reed men's right. Keep the world from shaking. He circled to the kennels one last time. He knew what he risked. If he freed more dogs, the pack would do as a pack does, sing, draw, pull knots into the night that would be hard to unknot before morning. He did not free them. He loosened a latch. He stood and let his breath find Elder in the dark. He thought, not words, but weight. The dog pressed his good skull against bars. Isaiah pressed back with his palm, bars between, blessing that felt like a sin and sanctioned both. Guard them, he whispered, not sure if he meant the fugitives or the sleeping ones left behind or some idea of us that included more than bodies. Elder's breath warmed his fingers, then withdrew. He turned to go and found Nathaniel in the passage, not a yard away. They looked at each other the way men do who have finally met the version of the other they dreamed of when they were alone. The master's pistol this time was not at his side. His hands were empty as truth. You could have killed me at the steps, Nathaniel said. You did not. It would have made a worse night, Isaiah said. And a worse morning. Where are they? Nathaniel asked, voice so civil it could cut. Where are my servants? Isaiah thought of the arithmetic of words. He chose one that did not lie and did not give. Gone, he said. Gone where? To places your map hasn't learned yet. Nathaniel's nostrils flared. Do you know what you have done? Yes, Isaiah said. I have made your dogs into a language you cannot speak. He stepped sideways. And taught your house to listen to a whistle it will never hear. Nathaniel could have called. He could have reached for a pistol that wasn't there. He could have attempted virtue. He did none. He stepped out of Isaiah's path as if circumstance had leaned a little and he could not quite keep his balance. If my son is harmed, he said, and left the thread a neat little blank for the night to fill. Your son is a boy who runs toward lanterns, Isaiah said. He is with the other boys who do the same. He is safe. It was true enough to live on for an hour. Isaiah reached the cane, reached the gully, reached the tunnel's mouth. Della's hand appeared like a thought becoming a thing you could hold. He handed the boy to her grip and the sick man to the lean smith. A line of bodies moved through the weed-slick dark, soft-spoken as prayer. He lifted his hand one last time and carved the air with the closing line of a fugue, down left, upright, the old road nobody maps. Elder's answering hush came like a benediction from the yard. The reeds caught and parted. The river opened, a long black mussel, breathing. Figures waited, low in the grass, their faces striped with the last remembering of cloud light. Anan lifted his chin. You have them? He asked, and when Isaiah nodded, he did not smile. Then the first boat goes now. Do not waste the first boat. First boats are like first lies. If you botch one, you will botch the rest. Women stepped in. The boy with the crooked foot. The old woman whose hands still knew braids. Della paused and looked at Isaiah like a question that had learned how to be its own answer. You, she asked. I stay, he said. Tonight. He did not tell her of the others he meant to guide later, of the ones with babies, the ones with debts to their own bodies. He did not say he needed to turn the pack into a ghost that would haunt any posse sent downriver. He did not say he wanted to be the last man to leave a room so the room would never forget his name. He only touched her wrist again, and this time did not take his hand away until Anan coughed, practical as always. The first boat slid. Reeds learned the shape of it and then forgot. Isaiah listened to the sound until it was no longer sound but the idea of safety a mile out. He turned back and the night turned with him, like a dog taught by patience to match a man's knee. He did not get far before the shot. It cracked the old way men crack old whips against young air. Not from the house, not from Cobb, not from Levi. From the river path behind, left. A neighbor's field hand pressed into moonless militia. The cry came after, a choking, not one of his. Isaiah ran toward it because that is what a man does when a sound is wrong. He ran bent, forearm over eyes as if the dark could blind him worse. He dropped into the muck and slid the last 5 feet, and his hand found a body warm as bread and twice as bloody. A man he did not know. A man trying to be brave on the wrong side of the river. The man looked at him, very young. "I didn't mean," he said. "I know," Isaiah whispered. "Don't mean again." He pressed the wound. He did not hold hate in him for boys who hold guns badly. He had to hoard his hate for use where it could pay dividends. Lights now, far upriver, little coins scattered that men might spend. He heard dogs, unfamiliar ones, voices high with hunger. Paid dogs. Dogs with no Isaiah in their arrhythmic lives. He stood and the world tilted and righted itself under his feet like a boat taking his oath seriously. He put 2 fingers to his mouth and sent a new sound into the cane, a lie, a river's echo, a fox's song. Elder answered from the yard with a harmony that made the night choose him over other men. Back at the house, bells. Not literal, this was no church, but the small, frantic clang of kettles struck in a row. Nathaniel's way of rousing. Cobb's belligerence ran ahead of him. Levi's lantern bounced like an excited remark. Isaiah ran the opposite way. He reached the trench, the gully, and then the low field past the smokehouse where he had taught Mercy to stitch ground to paw. He whistled the circle and brother appeared with 2 shapes in his wake, a girl with twin braids like black rope and a boy clutching a book he couldn't read. Isaiah took the book and tucked it under his own shirt. "Later," he said, and the boy's mouth quivered and then set, proud to have given a grown man a burden. They moved. Voices of paid men and their dogs came behind now, ragged, excited. The paid dogs knew the smell of fear and the taste of coin. They did not know Isaiah's grammar. He lifted a hand and drew a lie in the air so beautiful it broke his own heart, a curve into nothing, a cent turned backwards. Mercy, working left, dragged her paw just so in a place Isaiah had prepared, and the earth itself collaborated by caving a little where a stump once was. Paid dogs love a rut because ruts give them history to read. They would take that story and run themselves in a circle until rage exhausted them. Isaiah's chest hurt. It was not fear. It was the ache of stretching a bridge beyond what he had tested it for. "Down," he said, and bodies ducked as a lantern swung above like a small sun unhinged. Cobb's whip snapped the dark and bit a tree. He swore ceremonially. Nathaniel barked instructions in a tone that made the air learn literacy. Men tried to be the kind of men their voices promised, this made them sloppy. At the second boat, Della turned in her seat and did not see Isaiah because Isaiah had already melted into dirt. She faced the river and saw a third light where no boat should be. She hissed. Anan swore for the first time Isaiah had heard him swear. "Backwater," he ordered. "Low. Low." The light was wrong, not lantern, not moon. A box of flame, carried dumb. A man with the idea of fire and no idea of wind. Isaiah reached them in a crouch that elected him a beast among beasts. He breathed a note and the note convened Elder from the house's edge like a miracle disguised as practice. Elder took point. Mercy flanked. Brother looped. The pack drew the wrong light toward themselves as a matador draws a bull, no cape, only nerve. Isaiah stood and looked at the man with fire, and the man looked back and saw, perhaps, a shadow. He threw the box. The box met rain and hissed like anger told a joke about itself. "What are you?" the man asked, voice small, not cruel, only hired. I am the reason your dogs will not eat you when you go home empty, Isaiah said. He did not lift his hands. He let the dog's silence be a sermon. The man stepped back. He stepped back again. He chose not to be brave enough to die for pay. He left. As dawn started a gray letter in the east, Isaiah had carried 12 souls to the reeds, then 14, then 18. He sent boats with spacing like stitches that do not pucker fabric. He kept 3 with him who could not be hurried, a woman with a baby not yet finished, a man whose breath had learned painful music, the boy with no book now and thumbs that would not unbend for an hour. He was ready to go himself, at last, when the house made a sound he had not heard before, a grief sound, raw as a jaw cracked. He turned and saw Eugenie, the mistress, on the steps. Her nightdress had no dignity left in it. Her hair had let itself down to do the only useful thing hair can do in a crisis, be forgotten. She clutched at air that did not answer. "My child," she said, "not dramatic, not practiced, not useful." "Levi?" Isaiah's stomach sank. He had promised a kind of safety to a dangerous boy. It is a bad thing to promise about boys, because boys keep trying to be men, and men keep making mistakes. He ran. He left the last 3 with Ainan's no-nonsense face and with Mercy's chest against the woman's leg like ballast. He ran toward the voice of a boy who had gone wrong from birth and would keep going wrong until he hit a tree. He found Levi by the trench, not far from where Isaiah had set the boy with the crooked foot into escape. Levi had slipped and struck his head on a rock slick with the river's breath. He had bled into his own hair. He was not dead. He was the thing worse than dead, at least for the next 7 minutes, hurt and ashamed. "Help me," he said, and it was not an order. It was a boy speaking at last to a man. "Please." Isaiah knelt. He could leave the boy. He could lift him. In one hand he held the future of men he loved. In the other, a duty even a slave might carry, to be the kind of man who does not walk past bleeding children, even rich ones. He had never believed in rescue as a class-specific sacrament. He put his hands under Levi's shoulders and lifted. "Up," he said. "Don't talk." Levi cried a little because pain does that to people, because whiteness and power do not keep blood from hearing itself. Isaiah carried him to the edge and set him down where his mother could see him and believe, in half-light, that the world had not ended in the single worst way it could end for a woman who had made a home by pretending to love prison. Cobb arrived panting and furious not to have earned this heroism. Nathaniel came behind, pale and angry at everything. Isaiah took a step back, then another, as if the ground behind him were a slope into river and he had finally decided to take it. "Stop," Nathaniel said, pistol out, voice tired. He had counted now, he had done the arithmetic, he had seen figures float off his ledgers like smoke from a candle snuffed between wet fingers. "We are not done." "We are," Isaiah said. "I am." He lifted his hands and whistled the last note he had taught, a farewell and a warning, a promise and a prayer. The pack replied from 3 places at once. Men shouted because even freedom sounds like fear when it comes for you in a tongue you do not speak. Isaiah turned and ran to the reeds, to the woman with the baby, to the man with the painful music in his chest. He helped them into the last boat and stepped last into it because someone had to carry the weight of the story to the other bank. He did not look back. He did not refuse the impulse to look back. He simply did not have time for it. The first bullet came like a wasp and died with the same pitiful certainty against the water. The second lodged in the wood of the boat like a black seed. The third, no third. Ainan had thrown a smudge of river mud and made a little fog of his own that the houseboys shot in their pride. The reeds took the boat and the boat took the river and the river took Isaiah and Della's last look and made a braid he would keep beside his heart. On the far bank, men with hums and nets of words pulled them up and kissed babies they did not know. Freedom is always rude at first, too loud or too quiet. It takes a day to size your own name properly and not trip over it. Isaiah stood on sodden, foreign dirt and waited to feel something he had been promised since the first time he traced G on a window. What he felt was work. Work cut clean and ready to be shaped. They walked a road invented by feet. They moved by day under cover that had been paid for by nights of patient practice. Isaiah did not speak as leader or priest. He spoke as a man issuing instructions for survival: when to breathe, when to eat, when to let the baby cry, and when to put a finger gently, against its lips and teach it that quiet is sometimes the only God that answers. In a church basement 2 towns north where no white man had ever counted the windows twice, a woman set bread on a table as if she were laying down an altar. She put Isaiah's hands around a cup. She washed the baby like it had been born there. She asked no questions until morning. In the morning, she asked them all at once, not with greed but because she had to fill a book whose pages were people. Name, she asked, and Isaiah said, Isaiah Quell, and felt his name stand up and become new muscle. A week later, men with wedges in their shoes and papers in their pockets followed a rumor of a man who had taught dogs not to hunt people. They went to Nathaniel's house and drank his liquor and asked if he had ever considered moving west where the soil did not hide water under it. They told him that the river had 92 places to cross if you knew how to count like water. They gave him advice about buying different dogs. They left him with a quiet so loud it whitened his hair. Isaiah learned new river bends, and he learned the city noises that cover footsteps that ought not be heard. He listened to boats. He learned, slowly, to sleep in safety like a man learning to walk after war. He learned Della's breath at rest and Della's laugh waking, and he learned that leadership is a thing you do in your throat when others' throats have gone too tight to speak. When word came, 2 months, then 3, that a posse had taken to hiring dogs from far counties, trained animals with no Isaiah in their history, he built a belt of silence around the routes so thick that noise fell off it like rain off oil. He taught boys to hum the way Anan had, and girls to carry letters on their tongues that could be swallowed whole if a white face crested the hill. He never forgot the pack. He sent a man, then another, to stand at the edge of the cane and whistle Elder would know. Elder answered once, then twice, then not again, because even dogs learn grief. Mercy's drag was heard in a field when nobody walked it. Brother's grin showed up in a boy who had never owned a mirror but had learned to smile like he'd just outwitted a snare. Years turned, quiet first and then with names. Newspapers learned how to record certain men's good deeds and certain men's bad ones and got both wrong half the time. Isaiah's name was not in them. He did not mind. Names and papers draw bullets as surely as lanterns draw boys. One winter, a man came south from a city that would one day be a mouth everyone knew how to say. He brought with him a paper that said Isaiah could work for pay and sleep without permission. Isaiah read it himself, slow, the words cooperating for once. He felt the letter G stand up under his skin and shake hands with a new word, government, which is just the way people agree to make rooms together and keep or break the promises those rooms imply. He agreed to a wage as if he were agreeing to a weather forecast, not trusting it, but taking an umbrella. He went back once more to the river's edge where cane hissed and frogs rehearsed the same line they'd been given in creation. He stood under a sky that had never chosen a side and he put 2 fingers to his mouth. He gave the whistle that had started the night the house changed shape. Not loud. Not pleading. Not even remembering. Simply present. A sound made by a man who would always be faithful to the moment when he had chosen to be himself. A dog answered. He did not see it. He did not need to. Some answers are for the blood, not the eyes. He turned to walk back toward the road made by feet. Della met him halfway with a basket and a look that reminded him to eat, and behind her came 3 children, 2 of whom carried their own names like torches and one who carried somebody else's name like a secret knife to use when needed. They walked into a future that would keep asking for the same thing the past had asked for: patience, courage, a good hand on a hinge. By spring, men met under a borrowed roof to talk about papers that would actually mean. Isaiah sat in the back and did not speak until one of the men, important, educated, small in the way small men are small, suggested that it had all been a miracle. Isaiah stood then and said, as politely as a man can say a truth that hurts, it wasn't a miracle. It was a dog learning a new whistle. It was 3 doors. It was a woman remembering the sound of a latch and teaching her hands not to be the jailer of her own future. It was patience. They looked at him and saw a man with a dog's steady eyes and a river's long memory. They wrote words. The words did what words always do, some of them stuck and made sense, some slipped. Isaiah kept on with the work that didn't slip. On a night of fresh thunder years later, a knock came gentle at his small house 3 counties from where he'd started. He opened it and a boy stood there who had once had a book and no way to read it. The boy was taller than Isaiah now and carried under his arm a new book with his own name inside. He had brought that name to show Isaiah. Isaiah ran his thumb across the letters until they warmed, and then he handed the book back as if giving a man a cup. "Stay for stew," Della called from the kitchen, and her voice still had that hinge of iron and mercy. The boy stayed, and the stew went down the way good stories do, hot, practical, and leaving the eater stronger than he had been. When he lay down that night, Isaiah dreamed as he always did, not of horrors, not often, though they came like weather, not of men who had tried to make him less than a man, not even of escape. He dreamed of the moment when the dogs had drawn a triangle around a boy and a set of keys and a life, and how a single open palm had changed a house's idea of itself. He woke with the whistle on his lips, and Della turned and put a hand over his mouth and laughed, and the laugh said, "Hush now. You don't need it anymore." He smiled into her palm and believed her for a whole morning. But one evening, years and miles away from Nathaniel's wet porch, Isaiah walked by a river that did not know his name and saw 3 lanterns appear low in the reeds across. He stopped. He counted. 1, 2, 3. Not boats. Not boys. Not hired. He raised 2 fingers, old as patience, and wonder moved through him like an animal testing a new door. He put the whistle between his teeth in. He heard other dogs before he blew, not his, not paid, not hungry, dogs that did not belong to anybody and who had learned a language all their own. They were running the banks toward his 3 lanterns. He looked at the water and at Della coming down the path with bread in a cloth and at the children learning to throw stones so they skipped and did not sink. The lanterns bobbed and grew. The unseen dogs came on, and he had just enough time to decide whether to call the old note into a world that had changed or to trust that the world had learned his note without him. He drew breath. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.